Hello and welcome to this tutorial on using OBS to stream to the Mimic platform. Now OBS is available on Windows, Mac and Linux, and it's free to use on all of these operating systems. Today I'm going to be using a Mac, but you'll see that the preferences across all of these platforms are very similar. And we're going to start off over here on the project dashboard, and we're going to click on Stage Control, and then at the top here, Broadcast. Now depending on what we're going to be creating in terms of an input, we've got two options. The one is SRT, which is relatively new, and the other one is RTMP. So if you're unfamiliar with SRT, RTMP will work just fine. So to start off, we are going to give our input a name. I'm going to call it test, and then choose RTMP and click on next. Now this will take us to a window, essentially giving us two options. The one option is testing RTMP, and the other one is I understand how RTMP works. Now it's important to know how this works because there is a cost associated with your stream. So if you're testing RTMP, I suggest using test RTMP. This stream will automatically shut down after 30 minutes. Whereas if you choose the I understand how RTMP works, that stream will remain live until you delete it. It's a very important little step there. So I'm going to go ahead and choose testing RTMP. This takes us to step 3, which is our video rendition options. Now over here you can choose different resolutions and bitrate options that you want to make available to your viewers. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it as default because that should work just fine for most applications. If you're unsure about what any of these means, a lot of this is explained on the Mimic how-to website. So let me just quickly show you what that looks like. So over here, it takes you through the various steps. Here at the bottom, pretty important, is your encoder settings, and we're going to use that at the later stage to plug that into OBS. So typically when choosing a video rendition, it's a good idea to choose a few different resolutions, maybe a few sort of higher resolution desktop resolutions. These lower resolutions are also perfect for people with slower internet speeds or with bandwidth issues. And then in terms of where you're streaming to, under other settings, you want to make sure that you choose a server that's close to you. So if you're on the East Coast in the United States, you'll probably choose Virginia. If you're on the West Coast, California would probably be a good choice for you, and so on and so forth, depending on where in the world you are. For my use case, I'll probably choose Mumbai today. Now our next setting over here is segment length. 4 is a good default. And then over here under preset configuration, I'm just going to leave this at live standard. It's a good default. It's a good sort of midway. Okay, now let's go have a look at OBS. So if I open that up, now in OBS over here, you'll see that I've just got one scene. I've labeled it RTMP. I've got a test loop running over here. There's a bit of audio playing. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to settings. We're going to firstly check our video and make sure that you're sending the highest resolution that you selected in your rendition settings. You'll have your canvas and your output, and generally these two would be the same. Or if you think that bandwidth might be an issue, you can run the entire broadcast in 720. In which case, if you go back to Mimic, and here under video rendition, we will deselect the 1920 by 1080. In general, your base canvas and your output should be the same as your highest resolution selected in Mimic. Now, the next thing we're going to choose is the output. There is a simple and advanced mode. We're going to use the advanced mode just so we can sort of see all of the various options available to us. Now under encoder over here, depending on whether you're on a Mac, PC or Linux system, you might see different options available to you in terms of encoding. But generally X264 is a CPU encoder, and that should be the same across all platforms. Now if you're on a Windows machine, you might see something like an NVIDIA hardware encoder in this section. So choose whatever suits your system the best. I'm just going to stick with X264 since that works just fine. Okay, and rate control, we are going to keep this at a constant bitrate. In general, this is almost always required for RTMP streaming. So we're going to leave this on CBR or constant bitrate. If we go back to Mimic and we have a look at our video renditions, you'll see that our highest resolution is 4.3 megabits per second. So if we send a 5 or 6 megabit per second stream, we should be fine. Your keyframe interval should be 2. So if we go back to the documentation and we have a look here at the bottom, as we mentioned earlier, you'll see that our keyframe interval is recommended at 2 seconds. Underneath that, you'll also see that our bitrate encoding is also suggested. You'd want CBR, as I mentioned, and our audio bitrate is recommended to be at 128 kilobits per second. If we then move up a bit, you'll see that our H.264 profile should be high or main, and then just on top of that, you'll see our video codec H.264 should be 4.1 for 30 frames per second and 4.2 for 60 frames per second. So most of the settings over here in OBS, we already kind of have filled in. I'm just quickly going to double check our audio rendition over here. Yes, it is set to 128 kilobits per second. So everything looks like it's matching. So our last piece is going to be our stream details. If I go to stream in OBS, I'm just going to delete this server and stream key, as we are going to be getting this from Mimic once we set up our stream. I'm going to go back to Mimic and then I'm going to click add. So now what's going to happen is an actual encoding machine in the cloud is being prepared for us. You'll see a pop-up that basically tells you that your renditions are being set up in the cloud and that this usually takes about 2 minutes. You see now that the encoding's been done and we are now presented with our encoding details. You'll see at the top right over here that we are in test mode and that the clock is running. Okay, now what we have to do is we need to go and populate OBS with our encoding details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this stream URL and we'll go and paste it into OBS. And then we'll go back to Mimic and copy our stream key. And we'll go and paste it under stream key in OBS. And then you can click OK. You don't need to use authentication. And now we're going to go ahead and start streaming. So in OBS, and the bottom right over here, you'll see a little green block. Now green is good. That shows us that our stream is healthy and we've got sufficient bandwidth to stream our content. I'm going to go back to Mimic. I'm just going to close this window. Just before I do that, these two links over here, the HLS player and the Dash player, will allow you to see the player in 2 different ways. If you're familiar with using the HLS or Dash manifest, these are the URLs that you can use for any of your testing. Or maybe taking the player details and just putting it into another platform outside of Mimic and just using Mimic to encode. Okay, so now what you can do is you can either activate or you can preview your stream. Now, as you can see, our stream is running properly. This is very handy for, let's say you're running multiple inputs and you just wanted to check that the stream is up and running and active before activating it. This is a perfect way of doing that. Now that I've seen that the stream is running, I can now go ahead and activate it by clicking and holding on activate. And there you go. If for some reason you want to go back and check your encoding details, you can click on the gear icon over here and the details that we saw previously will pop up. Okay, well that's about it. Depending on your workflow, you might want to go back to a holding slide or something else. And we'll just go ahead and activate our default stage again. We do recommend that you switch to a different stage or an input when you're finished. And this is because when the stream is turned off, you might get a timeout or a playback error. So in your broadcast page, you might want to set up a thank you or thank you page that you can go to once you're done with your stream. And now you can basically go and delete your encoding. And we can confirm that. And then that's going to stop everything. And then if we go back to OBS, we're just going to go and stop the stream from this side as well. Okay, and that's it for streaming to Mimic from OBS.